My name is Alyssa, and this happened during my second year of college. I had an evening class every Tuesday and Thursday that ended at 8:40 p.m. The professor was a man named Dr. Bennett. He was quiet, strict, and never really joked around with students. I didn't dislike him, but I also never felt comfortable around him. He had this habit of holding eye contact just a little too long when speaking to people. Story 1. My professor followed me home. I lived about 15 minutes from campus by foot, and most nights I walked home alone. It wasn't a dangerous area, and I had done it plenty of times. The first time I noticed his car, I didn't think much of it. I was walking down Maple Avenue, maybe 5 minutes away from campus, when I saw a dark gray sedan parked on the opposite side of the street. The headlights were off, but the engine was running. As I passed, I glanced over and saw someone sitting in the driver's seat. I couldn't see their face clearly, but the shape of their glasses looked familiar. I kept walking. A few minutes later, when I reached the corner near the pharmacy, the same car slowly drove past me. It didn't speed up, it just rolled by as if the driver wanted to make sure I noticed it. I got home feeling uneasy, but I told myself I was overthinking it. The following Thursday after class, I left campus the same way as usual. I was halfway down Maple when I spotted that gray sedan again. Same place, same side of the road, same dim glow from the dashboard. This time I recognized the license plate. It belonged to Dr. Bennett. I remembered seeing it in the faculty parking lot earlier that semester because it had a small dent near the rear bumper. The exact same one was visible now under the streetlight. I slowed down. The car didn't move. I decided to cross the street. As soon as I did, the headlights came on. I froze for a second. Then I kept walking faster now. His car pulled away from the curb and drove past me. I watched it continue ahead, turn at the next intersection, and disappear. By the time I got home, I was shaky. I debated telling someone, but I felt ridiculous. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe I had just noticed him twice and built a whole story in my head. The next Tuesday, I tested it. Instead of taking my normal route home, I left through the back of campus and went down a street I almost never used. It added another 10 minutes to my walk, but I needed to know. For the first few blocks, nothing happened. Then I heard a car turning slowly behind me. I looked back. The gray sedan. My stomach dropped. I immediately crossed the street. The car kept going. Then just before the next intersection, it pulled into an empty parking lot and stopped. I didn't want to look, but I did. Dr. Bennett was sitting behind the wheel, staring straight ahead. I took out my phone and called my roommate. I spoke loudly, telling her where I was and asked her to stay on the line until I got home. I never mentioned the car because part of me didn't want to sound panicked. As I kept walking, I watched the sedan pull out again. It followed at a distance for another block before finally turning away. That night I barely slept. The next class, I avoided looking at him entirely. But when he passed out the graded assignments, he placed mine on my desk and leaned down slightly. "You take a different way home now?" he asked quietly. I looked up at him, thinking I had misheard. "What?" He smiled, but only a little. "Safer, I suppose." Then he walked away. I didn't stay for the rest of the class. I grabbed my things and left before the lecture ended. I went straight to campus security and told them everything. They wrote it down, listened politely, and asked if he had ever threatened me directly. When I said no, their entire attitude changed. They said they would look into it, but that was all. So I started getting rides home from classmates whenever possible. For a week, nothing happened. Then one night, after studying late in the library, I walked outside and saw his car parked across the road, not near the faculty lot, not near the classroom building, across from the library exit. I backed inside immediately and called campus security. This time, while I was on the phone, I watched him through the glass doors. He stepped out of the car. He didn't come toward the library right away. He just stood there beside the driver's door, hands in his coat pockets, looking at the entrance. At me. A security officer arrived a few minutes later. The second Dr. Bennett saw him, he got back into his car and drove away. The officer walked me to my dorm and promised they would document it. The next morning, the department chair emailed me asking to meet. Apparently, security had reviewed cameras from the streets around campus. Dr. Bennett's car had been caught following me on several different nights, even before I had started noticing. Story 2. My substitute teacher was outside my window. This happened when I was 17 during my final year of high school. Our regular history teacher went on medical leave for a few weeks, so the school brought in a substitute named Mr. Palmer. He wasn't like most substitutes. He actually taught the class instead of throwing on a movie and sitting behind the desk. He was young, maybe in his late 20s, and he always seemed overly interested in the students. Not in a friendly way exactly, more like he was studying everyone. He asked strange questions sometimes: where people lived, whether they walked or got picked up, what roads they took home. Most students laughed it off because he said it casually, almost like small talk before class started. I never answered. I didn't like him from day one. One Wednesday, I got sick and stayed home from school. My parents both worked late, so I spent most of the day in bed watching old horror movies and drifting in and out of sleep. By evening, I felt a little better. It had rained all afternoon and the house was quiet except for the occasional dripping from the gutter outside my bedroom window. Around 10:30 that night, I turned off my TV and rolled over, trying to fall asleep. That's when I heard something outside, a soft crunch, like someone stepping on wet gravel. My bedroom was on the first floor facing the backyard. We didn't have a fence, just a line of trees behind the house and a narrow side path that led around to the driveway. I held my breath and listened. Another step, then another. I sat up and stared at the window. The curtains were mostly closed, but there was a small gap in the middle. At first I saw nothing but darkness. Then a pale shape moved just beyond the glass. I jerked backwards so fast I almost fell off the bed. Someone was standing outside my window. I couldn't make out their face, just the outline of a head and shoulders. They were close enough that if I reached forward and opened the curtain, I probably could have touched the glass between us. I grabbed my phone and called my dad. While it rang, I kept staring at the silhouette, too terrified to look away. Right before my dad answered, the figure stepped back into the darkness and vanished. I told him someone had been outside my room. He immediately called a neighbor, then the police. My parents rushed home. The officers searched the yard but didn't find anyone. They did, however, find fresh footprints in the mud below my window. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day I returned to school because staying home alone felt worse. I walked into history class exhausted and jumpy. Mr. Palmer was writing something on the board when I came in. He turned, smiled at the class, and then his eyes landed on me. "You're feeling better," he said. I froze. I knew teachers got attendance updates, so that alone shouldn't have bothered me. But something about his tone did. It didn't sound like a question. It sounded like he already knew. I sat down and tried to focus on the lesson. I couldn't. Later that afternoon, while standing by my locker, I noticed a small smear of dried mud on the cuff of his pants. That might have meant nothing. It had rained. Lots of people had mud on their shoes. But then I saw his shoes. The sole pattern matched the footprints outside my window. At least I thought it did. I spent the rest of the day convincing myself that was impossible. There was no reason he would know where I lived. No reason he would come to my house. No reason. Then I remembered the attendance sheet on his desk. It had student addresses printed on it. That night, I asked my dad if I could sleep in the living room. He didn't understand why, but he agreed. At around midnight, the motion light in our backyard flicked on. My dad noticed it first. He paused the TV and looked toward the sliding glass door. I turned my head slowly. Someone was standing at the edge of the yard, just inside the light. This time I saw him clearly. Mr. Palmer. He was wearing the same dark jacket he had worn to school that day. He stood completely still, staring toward the house. My dad shot up from the couch and shouted. Mr. Palmer immediately turned and ran toward the trees behind the property. My dad called the police while chasing him as far as the back porch, but he was gone by the time officers arrived. We told them who he was. The next morning they went to the school. Mr. Palmer didn't show up for work. They eventually tracked him down at the apartment he had been renting. I never learned everything they found, but my dad told me enough. There were printed pages with several student addresses on them. Mine was one of them. There were also photos taken from outside houses at night. The school tried to keep it quiet, but the rumors spread anyway. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had noticed weird things around my home. Mr. Palmer was arrested, and I never saw him again. Still, whenever I wake up in the middle of the night and see even the faintest shape outside a window, my mind goes right back to that first night. That black silhouette, standing silently on the other side of the glass. Story 3. My professor came to our house at midnight. My name is Nicole. I'm 19 and this happened about a month ago. At the time, I was living in a rented house with 3 friends, Harper, Emily, and Charlotte. None of us could afford a place on our own, so splitting rent was the only way we could make things work. It was a Thursday night, and we had all decided to skip classes the next day. We were exhausted and wanted one lazy morning without alarms or lectures. Nothing was really happening. Harper was scrolling through TikTok on the couch. Emily had half fallen asleep under a blanket. Charlotte was in the kitchen looking for snacks, and I was upstairs in my room lying in bed with my phone. Then I heard a knock at the front door. Not a polite little tap, a firm, heavy knock. A few seconds later, I heard Charlotte call out from downstairs. "Who is it?" I sat up, listening. Then I heard the front door open. Almost immediately, Charlotte slammed it shut again. I hurried downstairs and saw her standing with both hands pressed against the door, completely frozen. "What happened?" I asked. She looked over at me, pale. "It's Mr. Weaver." Mr. Weaver was one of the professors at our college. We all knew who he was. Even students who had never taken his class knew his name because there had been rumors about him for months. Nothing official, nothing anyone could prove. But enough stories that most girls on campus avoided being alone with him. Before any of us could say another word, he started shouting from outside. "Open the door!" His voice was loud enough to make Emily sit straight up on the couch. Charlotte stepped backward from the door. Then he yelled again, even angrier this time. He called her a disgusting name and demanded she let him in. We all just stood there in shock. Why was one of our professors outside our house that late at night? How did he even know where we lived? Emily started breathing faster and faster. She had always struggled with panic attacks, and within seconds she was curled up on the couch whispering, oh my God, it," over and over. I sat beside her and held her hands, trying to calm her down, even though I was terrified too. Harper moved toward the window and carefully lifted the edge of the blinds. "He's still there," she whispered. Another knock hit the door, harder. The whole frame shook slightly. Charlotte had already locked the deadbolt, but she checked it again, hands trembling. Then everything went quiet. No knocking, no shouting, nothing. We stayed still, listening. A few seconds later, we heard the slam of a truck door from outside. Harper peeked through the blinds again and watched his truck pull away from the curb. It disappeared down the street, and for a while none of us said anything. We barely slept that night. Every little sound outside made one of us look toward the windows. The next morning we argued about whether to report him. Part of us wanted to. Part of us was afraid nobody would believe us. He had knocked, shouted, and left. We didn't have footage. We didn't even know what we would say. So stupidly we waited. Friday passed. Then Saturday. By Sunday morning, the fear had started to dull slightly. Not disappear, but enough that I could move around the house without constantly looking out the windows. I was the first one awake that day. I had just gone downstairs wearing an oversized t-shirt and sleep shorts when someone knocked on the door. My whole body tensed. For one terrible second, I thought he had come back. I stepped quietly to the peephole. There were 2 police officers standing outside. I opened the door slowly. They asked, "Are you Nicole?" I said yes. The taller officer glanced toward his partner, then asked if I knew a man named Mr. Weaver. The moment he said the name, my stomach dropped. I nodded. They asked me to step outside. There were several police cars parked near our house. One was right by the curb, and in the back seat I saw Mr. Weaver. He was handcuffed, staring down at his lap. I had never seen him look like that before. Empty, almost detached. One of the officers led me a short distance down the sidewalk to his truck, which was parked crookedly near the corner. Then he opened the trunk. Inside was a large duffel bag. I won't describe everything I saw. I don't like thinking about it, and I doubt anyone listening would want the full picture anyway. But it was enough. Enough that I immediately understood why the officer beside me looked sick. Enough that I stepped backward and covered my mouth without even realizing it. Later, the police told us that a neighbor had reported seeing his truck circling our block early that morning. Officers stopped him nearby, and when they started questioning him, his answers didn't make sense. He claimed he was visiting someone, then said he was lost, then said he was just taking a drive. Eventually, they searched the truck. That was when they found the bag. One of the officers later told me that based on what was inside, they believed he had been planning to take someone by force. Me. I still don't know why he chose me. Maybe because I had his class, maybe because he had seen me around campus, maybe because he had somehow been watching us long before that night. I try not to think about that part. What I do think about is Thursday night. What if Charlotte had opened the door wider before realizing who it was? What if one of us had been home alone? What if he hadn't left when he did? The worst part is remembering his voice from outside the door, the way he shouted like he had a right to be there, like we were the ones being unreasonable for not letting him in. Even now, whenever someone knocks unexpectedly late at night, I freeze for a second before moving. Because no matter who is actually standing outside, part of me still expects to hear him again. Open the door.